Don't be so jumpy, old lad. Do that in the dock, and they'll think you're a kangaroo. Easy now.
Well, old fella, there you are. And what a sorry specimen you look.
You shouldn't be here, True.
We just wanted a quick word. A wee chinwag with young Henry here.
Come along then, True.
Shan't be a moment. Henry Jacoby. Another one to join our murder club. You know, we're only accepting members who kill them right out, like yourself.
That's enough now. Come along.
Artist as well. Ah. Yeah, I'm not surprised. We're a very artistic breed, you know.
True. I'm going to report you for this.
Excessively sorry, old thing, but I did so want to talk to Killer here.
Blimey!
Must get some glass for this, eh? What? Shall we?
I'll draw him a picture for his murder club.
So came about a meeting between the two men. Jacoby, an illiterate pantry boy, was accused of the murder of Lady White, tried in April 1922 and found guilty. And Ronald True, a man from the other end of the social scale, accused of killing a prostitute who was found brutally battered to death with a rolling pin in the bathroom of her Earl's Court flat. The only real suspect was True. Was True insane when he murdered Olive Young? Sir Henry Curtis Bennett, counsel for the defence, had to prove insanity if he was to save the accused man from hanging. Sir Richard Muir, counsel for the prosecution, did not have to prove that the accused was not insane, merely that at the time of the crime he was responsible for his actions.
Gentlemen of the jury, this murder was an exceedingly deliberate and brutal one which was carried out with great thoroughness. Nothing was left to chance.
Are you going to call True to give evidence?
Don't be funny, Freak. We couldn't take that sort of risk. That's what the fellow's going to do. One minute he's a perfect gentleman, and the next he's picking his carnation to pieces or playing with his bloody toy duck. Either way, we lose out. If he behaves himself, our insanity plea comes a cropper, and if he plays up, we'll frighten the jury into wanting the death penalty. No, he stays where he is.
It was obvious that the body had been dragged into the bathroom. Now, Miss Steele, for the last 18 months, you've been acting as domestic servant for Miss Yates, whom you knew as Olive Young at 13A Finborough Road. Can you tell the court what Miss Young was, Miss Steele?
She was a lady with friends.
These proceedings are not an occasion for laughter, Mr. True.
Can you tell us at what time you usually arrived at Miss Young's flat to commence work in the mornings?
Well, during the week I arrived at 9 precisely and stayed until 2. On a Sunday I'd arrive a little later, perhaps 11 or a quarter past. Miss Young didn't like to be disturbed too early on a Sunday.
What day was it that you first met the accused, Mr. True?
It was a Sunday, about 2 weeks before Miss Young lost her life.
What do you remember about Mr. True, Miss Steele?
He seemed a very well-to-do gentleman, nicely spoken. I couldn't help noticing, however, that he didn't wear a hat, which I thought inadvisable for that time of year.
Now, would you describe to the court what you did on the morning of Monday, March the 6th?
Certainly. I arrived at the flat at 9:15. The bus had been slightly delayed, and the first thing I noticed was that both the Milk and the Daily Mirror had been taken in.
And what did you notice when you went into the kitchen?
Well, there was a teapot with warm tea in it and a tray laid out with a cup and saucer and a bottle of milk. I assumed Miss Young had a visitor, so I decided to tidy up. When I went into the sitting room to start, I noticed there was a pair of man's gloves there, as well as a coat and a scarf. And while I was in the sitting room, I saw someone come along the passage.
Who was it?
It was Mr. True.
Was he coming from the direction of the bedroom?
Yes.
Did he say anything?
Yes. He said not to wake Miss Young, as they'd both been up late the night before.
Anything else?
Yes. He said she was in a deep sleep and he'd send a car round for her at 12. He still wasn't wearing a hat, and I said something to this effect, but he didn't answer. I don't think he heard me. Then he went off up the road, saying he was going to get a taxi.
And did you comply with Mr. True's instructions in not waking Miss Young?
Well, I knew Miss Young didn't like to sleep late of a weekday, so I knocked on the bedroom door. But there was no reply, so I went in.
Can you describe the state of the room?
It was rather messy, very unlike Miss Young. There was a broken cup on the floor, all the drawers in the dressing table were opened and the contents disarranged. I went over to see if anything had been taken, and the first thing I noticed was that the little jewel box was missing.
And Miss Young?
Well, there was a shape in the bed, so I assumed she was still asleep. Of course, when I went over to the bed, I saw that Miss Young was not in it, but that the shape was caused by 2 pillows laid lengthways down the bed. They were both covered in blood. And I immediately had a very sick feeling in my stomach because I knew something awful had happened to Miss Young.
Was there anything else in the bed?
Yes, sir. There was a rolling pin under the eider-down. That had blood on it as well.
What did you do then?
I went into the bathroom, sir.
Did you there see the body of Miss Young?
Yes.
Did you touch the body at all?
No, sir.
Will you speak up, please, Miss Steele?
No. It was awful.
Did you hear any noises in the flat before you saw Mr. True?
No, it was very quiet, sir.
Thank you. Now, did Mr. True, when you saw him, appear to be calm and collected?
Oh, yes. Very carefree, sir.
Yes. Now, you saw Mr. True on 2 occasions, and on each occasion he was not wearing a hat.
That's right.
And when you met him at the door of the sitting room, he quite clearly stated he would be sending the car round at 12?
Yes.
Thank you, Miss Steele. No more questions.
Thank you, Miss Steele. No further questions. Mr. Ramsey, you are the manager of the hat department at Horn Brothers in Coventry Street.
I am indeed.
Did you serve the accused, Mr. True, on the morning of Monday, March the 6th?
I did.
Can you be sure that it was Mr. True?
Of course. I had served Mr. True on a previous occasion. I remembered him as being a very jocular gentleman.
Did he purchase anything from you on the morning of Monday, March the 6th?
He did indeed. He bought a bowler hat for 18 shillings and 6pence. He spent a rather long time examining himself in the mirror with it on.
Did he purchase anything else?
Yes, he said he wanted a ready-made suit. And when he talked about buying another suit, he opened his coat and showed me blood on the trousers of the suit he had on.
And how did Mr. True account for the blood?
He said he'd met with an accident that morning in an aeroplane.
Did you sell Mr. True the suit?
Oh, not personally. I escorted Mr. True to the tailoring department, where I handed him over to our Mr. Milne. However, I stayed on while the purchase was being made. Mr. True found a suit that he liked for £5, and while he tried it on, he asked us to make a parcel of his old suit. Mr. Milne wrapped the blood-stained suit up in brown paper, but before doing so, he cleared the pockets of anything that looked important.
Was there anything that you noticed in particular?
Yes, a little jewel case.
Did he say anything more about the blood?
Yes, I asked him if the wound was still bleeding, and he said that it was. Still seemed in a very jocular mood. One thing he said about the suit: it's not so bad for a reach-me-down. I think he underestimated the quality of the suit.
Thank you, Mr. Ramsey.
Now, Mr. Ramsey, it has been suggested that Mr. True is taking careful steps to hide his tracks, and yet you say you knew Mr. True.
As I said, I had served him on a previous occasion.
So he was going where he was known?
Yes.
As regards the blood on his trousers, until he drew your attention to it, had you seen it?
No. I couldn't see it till he opened his coat.
Did you ask him to open his coat?
No, he did that of his own free will.
What about the little jewel box? He showed you that of his own free will, too. Was there any reason for him to open it?
None at all. He offered to show me what the case contained.
More hiding of the tracks, I suppose. Thank you, Mr. Rapp.
Thank you. Detective Inspector Burton, will you please tell the court how you tracked down Mr. True on the afternoon of Monday the 6th?
As a result of inquiries, we got into contact with Mr. Mazzola, True's hire car driver, who took us to Hammersmith. At 9:45 that evening, I went with Inspector Hawkin and 2 other colleagues to the Hammersmith Palace of Varieties, where I saw the accused and the witness Armstrong in a box in the theatre. I said to him, "I am a police officer, come with me." I took him outside the box. He showed little resistance. Upon searching him, we found over £17 in cash, 1 gold wedding ring, and a pawn ticket for a gold watch and a gold bracelet. We also found a small red jewel case in the pocket of True's coat.
Now, when you confronted him with the known facts of the case, did he have anything to say?
He made a reference to the jewellery. He said, "That is mine. I can explain how I got possession of it." He refused to make a statement, but later changed his mind. He repeated that he could explain his possession of the jewellery.
Now, he said twice that he could explain his possession of the jewellery. Has he ever, in fact, given you an explanation?
No.
Now, in the course of the statement which was read earlier, did not Mr. True state that he'd left Finborough Road at 1 o'clock on the Monday morning, the 6th, and had left Miss Young in the course of a violent argument with another man?
That is correct. However, as far as I have been able to discover, there is no such person as that described in the statement, and nor was there any sign of an intruder in the flat.
Good Lord, Speed, look at this.
What's the matter?
Well, some devil's cut an article out of my paper before I read it, too. It's a bit much.
It'll be an article about your trial. They have to censor it.
What the hell for? They expect me to be corrupted by reading about my own case.
It's a rule. There's nothing you can do about it.
Well, I still say it's a damned liberty. What's on the back? Foreign news. Well, thank God for that. They tampered with the racing results. I'd have something to say.
Oh, I didn't think much of your tit for Doncaster yesterday.
What was wrong with it? Came up?
Oh, no, I had a flutter myself on the strength. I think it's still running.
Ocean Warrior came in by 3 lengths.
Tortuosity was the one you give me, wasn't it?
Not me, old son. I wouldn't give you a bad lot like that. God bless the Prince of Wales. Good old Teddy. Now, there's a man after my own heart, Speed. Can't wait for the day when he takes over from the old buffer. There'll be gambling in the bloody streets, I should say so. He shouldn't wear a tit for, though. Don't suit him. Hats are a complete abomination, you know, Speed. Too much pressure on the old nut, drive you loco. Ah, Corbett, my man. Clear away the breakfast, will you? Have a good breakfast yourself, Corbett.
Bowl of porridge, same as always.
I'm sure that was very stimulating for you.
Now, you shouldn't tease the poor lad, True.
What? Mr. Armstrong, when did you meet the accused, Mr. True?
Must have been in February this year.
And the two of you became friends?
Well, yes. I thought Ronnie was a good egg.
What form did this friendship take?
We used to drive about in motor cars.
Who paid for these trips?
At first, Ronnie. Major True did. He seemed to have quite a lot of cash then.
Was this always the case?
No, about a month or so later, he was borrowing money from me.
What were you doing when you were driving about in the motor cars? Had you any object?
No, just driving around to amuse ourselves.
Well, now, Mr. Armstrong, on Monday the 6th, when you met Mr. True, did you notice whether Mr. True had any money with him?
Yes, 1 or 2 £5 notes. How many, I couldn't say.
Now, did you find during this period that Mr. True was very often telling you tales which were difficult to believe?
Yes, frequently.
And yet you used to listen to them?
Yes, during the course of making amusing conversation.
This is all a little vague.
Well, my memory of them's not so hot. There were so many. Principally to do with flying or police work.
Police work?
Yes. He said he was doing some police work in Mexico.
And what about the other Ronald True, Mr. Armstrong?
I'm sorry?
Were you not aware that Major True claimed there was a man going around impersonating him, incurring debts in his name?
Well, he was always telling what.
And what about the Murderers Club, Mr. Armstrong?
Murderers Club? Well, did you think he was joking?
Yes, there was nothing to it. There was a play in London had a catchphrase. Bob a knob it was. And Ronnie said he thought it'd be a good idea to form a society for disposing of people on a bob a knob basis.
You mean a sort of murderers club?
I suppose so, yes.
This is an extraordinary testimony. I should like to know, Mr. Armstrong, whether you offered any suggestions to this idea.
As a joke, I did, yes.
You made your suggestion of disposing of people, and he offered his suggestion?
Yes.
He was not a normal man, this man, was he, Mr. Armstrong?
I considered him very eccentric, but very good company.
Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. I have no further questions.
Mr. Armstrong, you were with Mr. True almost constantly in the month or so that you knew him. Did he ever strike you as being insane?
I wouldn't say insane, more eccentric.
No, you would not have continued your friendship had you thought him insane.
Good Lord, no. Ronnie was just a bit wild, that's all.
Yes. Now, with regard to this murderers' club, did you ever discuss appropriate victims?
I think we decided that mother-in-laws were appropriate.
I must admit I'm disturbed by the rather flippant treatment of this subject.
Now, tell us about the other Ronald True, Mr. Armstrong.
All it was Ronnie saying there's some chap with a similar name going around incurring debts and attributing them to Ronnie, impersonating him.
Do you know that there is a real person of the name of Ronald True, with the name True spelled T-R-E-W?
I didn't know that, no.
But it is possible that this story of impersonation may have referred to that other person.
I don't think it did.
Mr. Armstrong, apart from the strange nature of some of Mr. True's exploits, was there anything else you can recollect which would justify you using the word eccentric?
I can only think of small instances.
Well, I think this might be a convenient moment to adjourn for luncheon.
Have a bite.
No, thanks.
Go on. It's a present from me. To show there's no hard feeling.
I think you better sit down, True.
Oh, for God's sake, it's only a piece of bloody fowl.
Sit down, True.
In this case, members of the jury, you have to decide first whether the accused Ronald True did indeed kill the unfortunate girl, Olive Young. Now, if you are satisfied on that point, you have then to determine whether he was, in the legal sense, sane or insane. Now, I will call evidence to show you that from his earliest youth, True has been abnormal.
My full name is Grace Angus, and I am staying at an hotel in London.
Mrs. Angus, you are the aunt of the accused, are you not? And you have been in fairly constant contact with him most of his life.
Yes, since he was 4 years old.
From your knowledge of him, how long would you have judged him to be abnormal?
From the first day I set eyes on him.
For all the time or some of the time?
In all fairness, I would say some of the time. Sometimes he could be quite charming.
Now, when he was quite young, were there any incidents which you remember which struck you at the time as not normal?
Yes, indeed. When he was 4 or 5 years old, he kept a number of pet rabbits. Silly little things that were always escaping. One day he came into the house and said to me, "I have been crying." I asked him why. And he told me that he had been burying his rabbits. This struck me as very strange, so I went out with him to see the rabbits and found that he had buried them up to their necks in the ground, with only their heads showing. Little Ronald told me that he had done this several days earlier, but had left the heads showing so that he could see them every day. Most of the rabbits were, in fact, dead from starvation.
Yes, thank you. And when you saw him in the Alexandra Hospital, Cobham, just after the war had started, he would have been, what, 24?
About that, I would say.
Would you say his mental condition had improved?
No, it was worse.
Do you know if he was on a drug of any kind at the time?
He was being given some drugs. He was also taking drugs not prescribed for him.
Ah, how did he obtain these drugs?
He would bribe the orderly to bring him morphia. Shortly afterwards, he was removed to a private nursing home where I saw him again.
Was there anything peculiar about his conduct then?
Yes, there was. He would go about in a bath chair with a little hooter attached. There was also a toy doll and a squeaker. He used to go through the town like that, making noises. It seemed to amuse him.
Yes. Anything else?
His memory was frightful. He could not remember anything of anything I had said to him the time before. And he looked very ill.
Yes. Now, later in 1920, you saw the accused in Brighton, where he was at another nursing home being cured of morphia addiction.
That is so. One day he said to me, "I have the most wonderful billet. There's a whopping salary." He showed me some agreement he claimed to have with the Portuguese government. It had obviously been written by himself and signed over a penny stamp. When we pointed this out, he started to weep. Then he tore up the document and threw it in the fender. Another time he said to me, "I am going to enjoy life when I can. I am going to be killed through a woman soon."
Now, from his childhood, as I understand you, he was a very untruthful person.
Yes.
Given to tell stories that were pure fiction.
Absolutely.
In early childhood, that is not at all uncommon, is it? In quite normal children?
Quite. From 3 to 5 or 7 years of age, they do.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Mrs. Angus, you have children of your own. Now, could the sort of stories being told in his childhood by this man be described as normal children's stories?
No, most definitely not.
Thank you, Mrs. Angus. Thank you. I call Francis Roberts True. Mrs. True, you are the wife of the accused, and you have one child who will be 3 years old this month. Is that right?
That is correct.
When and where did you first meet your husband?
In 1917. It was in New York, where I was living with my mother. Ronald was introduced to me by a friend of the family as a pilot in the Royal Flying Corps. At the time, he was injured with a poisoned leg. He told me he had been in France and had brought down several aeroplanes and had been wounded many times.
And were these stories true?
No, they were not.
And what were you doing at the time?
I was on tour.
I'm sorry, what does that mean?
I mean that I was in the theatrical profession at that time.
This is true. When were you first aware that your husband was taking morphia?
About 2 years after we were married. We went to Wales after Ronnie had been sent back from Africa with tropical fever. I knew he was taking it then in large quantities.
And how did he come by this drug?
I do not know. He was taking it in the form of injections.
Yes, what would happen to him under the influence of morphia?
He would become delirious.
Would he remember anything about it the next day?
No.
Would he believe you when you told him about the delirium?
No.
Apparently no recollection.
None whatever.
And how long would the effects of this delirium last?
A matter of hours. Sometimes 12 hours. On one occasion, it lasted from late in the afternoon, all during the night.
Well, at about this time, did you notice a difference in his mental condition generally?
Yes. He had great fits of depression and melancholia. His mother and I discussed the matter and agreed that he should go into a nursing home. Well, he seemed quite happy to go.
What was his financial position at this time?
He was supported entirely by his mother. He was always able to get any money he wanted from her. He was never stinted.
Would you tell the court, please, about the will you found in your husband's possession at this time?
I found the will in Ronnie's papers when he came back from Brighton. There were 2 bequests, even though he had no money of his own to leave. One was of £100 to the Dr. Bernardo's homes, and the other £100 to the Battersea Dogs Home.
Did you speak to him about it?
Yes, but he got very annoyed. He said people very frequently did strange things in mad fits.
What did you do with the will?
I burnt it. It was not a thing I was going to keep.
Mrs. True, generally, how were relations between you and your husband and your child? Was he affectionate?
Always. He was a very affectionate man. It was only this year that he changed. I had been away on tour, and he had been in hospital again. And when we met up again, he was very antagonistic. He said he was going away. He left in the middle of February and completely disappeared. I didn't see him again until after he was arrested.
Well, thank you, Mrs. True. I have no more questions to ask.
Take it easy, True. Take it easy.
Bloody needles. Give me the willies, bloody things.
There we are. There we are, True.
That's so, man.
Well, I'll leave you to it, then.
You sure it's going to be all right?
Oh, he won't give you any trouble. Poor devil. These drug addicts are all the same. Quiet as a lamb now.
You there, old man? Are you there, old man?
I'm here. It's all right.
Good. Good to hear from you, old man. Long time no hear.
Flight Lieutenant Morgan, can you tell us about the flying accident the accused had in February 1960?
Of course. True was on a cross-country flight about to descend at Farnborough. Silly ass had never been up there in the first place. He was about to land when he lost control of his machine, probably through lack of concentration. He was waving his arms about in the cockpit like an idiot. The plane was out of control. It crashed and he was pitched out on his head. He was unconscious for 48 hours.
How did he seem after he'd recovered from the accident?
Much worse than before. There was something a bit skew-whiff mentally.
Oh, what sort of skew-whiff things did he do?
Well, for some half-assed reason, he wouldn't wear a cap. Said it pained him to wear it, or some such nonsense. He'd carry it about with him, of course, and if he saw a brass hat, he'd stick it on his napper.
Yes, and before the accident, he had always worn his cap.
Of course.
After he got his wings, did he wear anything out of the common?
He did indeed. He had a special pair of wings made. Bloody great cardboard affairs, 3 times the normal size. He was a disgrace to the Corps.
Flight Lieutenant Morgan, were you with the accused in the plane when he had the accident?
Good Lord, no. Good job, too.
Oh, then how did you obtain your information about the crash?
I got it from a fellow at Farnborough. Don't recall his name now. He was in charge of the machines.
Now, how did this nameless person get his information?
He saw the crash.
And you cannot name him?
He was killed shortly afterwards, but I could easily find out.
Flight Lieutenant Morgan, you say you have come here to give information about facts, none of which is within your knowledge.
Are you suggesting
you were not there and you did not see them. What you have been telling us about the concussion is hearsay.
I did see the machine afterwards, but not when it crashed.
Did you see the accused fall out on his head?
No.
So, your evidence concerning the crash is pure hearsay?
Not exactly.
Thank you, Flight Lieutenant Morgan.
When did you first meet the accused, Mrs. Wilson?
At Murray's Club. It was in February of this year. He had an injured hip and couldn't dance, and I said to myself, what a funny chap.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson, if you'll just answer the questions.
Oh, I am sorry.
Now, did he want you to dance with anyone else?
No, he said I wasn't to dance with anyone. And I asked him what right he had to say such a thing.
What was your opinion of True's mental condition generally? Come along now, Mrs. Wilson.
Well, he was mad. No doubt about it. Right off his rocker. I was very frightened of him. He's the only man I've ever been frightened of in my life. Well, apart from my husband, that is.
What was it, Mrs. Wilson, what was it about him made you think he was mad?
Oh, everything. I mean, for a start, trying to take possession of me when he knew I was a married woman. And then, of course, he was always carrying this gun with the split bullets in it. He kept getting it out and showing me. And as for his appearance, well, his eyes were wild. And sometimes his whole mind would change from what he was talking about.
Would he be taking drugs or using a syringe at this time?
Oh, no. Just in the middle of conversation, his manner would change. He would star and forget what he was saying. I would have to call him back. And then he told me once that he'd found his mother dead at home with her head battered in and bleeding. Well, I knew this was a lie because there'd been nothing about it in the papers. And when I asked him about it, he said he was keeping it quiet. And then, of course, he was always going on about murdering this man who was impersonating him. And I thought...
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. Now, can you tell me, did he talk to you about murder other than murdering this other man?
Oh, constantly. One day he said, I will murder someone one of these days. You watch the papers and see if I don't. I'm perfectly certain I will get off. You watch the papers. I want to try it out.
Dr. Narwood East, you are the senior medical officer at Brixton Prison, are you not?
I am.
Now, during the time from Ronald True's arrest until this trial, were you able to observe and examine his behavior?
Yes.
From the point of view of a medical man, did you come to the conclusion that he was sane or insane?
Insane.
Certifiably insane?
Yes, a person with homicidal tendencies who ought to be locked up.
What do you say about his demeanor and general behavior?
He seems totally unconcerned by the awaiting trial. Remarkably so. He's shown no remorse for the victim, nor for the anxieties caused his relatives, of whom he appears to be very fond. I am speaking, of course, on the assumption that he committed the crime.
Has he ever shown you any consciousness or knowledge of what he's been accused of doing?
No, he's always denied it. He's never in the slightest way betrayed that he knew he'd done it.
With regard to his addiction to morphia, now, how would this affect the way he acted?
The most important way it would act would be in diminishing the moral sense.
The capacity to distinguish good from evil, right from wrong?
Yes, yes.
And what about the concussion which resulted from the air crash?
The concussion would exaggerate the mental defects from which he already suffered. An unstable person will be rendered more unstable by concussion.
And, in your opinion, was he already unstable?
Most certainly. The childish episodes, the persistent untruthfulness, the persistent boasting, the lack of appreciation he has, the early incident of treatment to animals, the fact that he showed no regret for the feelings of relations of whom he was fond, these are all very abnormal patterns.
Yes, so there are three things we have evidence of: abnormality of mind in youth, years of morphia taking, and the concussion resulting from aeroplane crashes.
Yes.
The possibility also of syphilis.
Yes, it was discovered that at some time in his life, Mr. True had contracted syphilis. This had obviously lain dormant for some time, but experts believe the poison can be set free without any fresh infection.
Speedy, old fella, you don't think all this is a bit much, do you?
What, the food?
No. I mean, all this is Ronnie a nutter palaver. I mean, there I am, sitting in a dock while a dozen or so boffins discuss in earnest terms where I've still got all me marbles. They should get me in there. I could tell them in a sentence.
What would you tell them?
That I was as mad as a bloody hatter, old man. That's what I'd tell them.
Oh, I wouldn't say that.
Well, if you don't, I hope they do, or I'll be topped. It's the old dirty linen I object to. Having a fella's nasty secrets dragged out in court. I mean, according to these pods, I've got every disease under the sun. Drug addiction, concussion, the pox, epilepsy. I mean, it's not going to look too good in the old scrapbook now, is it? And all this guff about the murderers' club, well, it's only a bit of play. I bet you know a few people you'd like to bump off.
Never a truer word said. True? What's the matter? You all right, True?
You know, you really shouldn't make fun of my name. It's the only one I've got.
I'm sorry. I didn't realise.
You know, you're quite a good egg, really, Speedy old fella. Anyway, I never touched her. Ah, Corbett, have a banana.
No, thanks.
Oh, go on, big chap like you.
I'm all right.
Well, I'll be off. See you in court, True.
I shall look forward to that, Mr. Speed. And don't forget the clarets.
Very good, sir.
Well, Corbett, what news on the Rialto?
What's that? Have you finished with that nosh?
Indeed I have. What's wrong?
I'll clear up later.
You know, you won't catch the pox just from touching my tray.
I never...
I saw you, don't deny it. This tray is disease went through that little Corbett brain. One touch and me plunker will drop off. Don't worry, old lad. Got over it years ago. Caught it off some appalling bint in Takar, Gold Coast.
She thought I was mad too. The massa what lived with his mama and he's sick in his head. The mama was Francie.
She knew nothing about the appalling bint, that goes without saying. Well, pick the bloody thing up, you oaf!
You can't speak to me like that.
Pick it up. I told you, quarantine's over. The yellow flag is up, or whatever it is.
I'll do it later.
Sorry, old lad. Nearly forgot.
The question we are upon is whether he knew that at the time he did this act, that it was an act punishable by law.
Yes.
He arranged the bed and pillows in the bed to look as if a person was in the bed.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons why I think he did know it was punishable.
And are there not a number of other things that the accused did? He concealed the body in the bathroom in such a way that a person looking in through the door could not see it. After the act, he washed his hands and left the room. He told the maid that her mistress was not to be disturbed, presumably in order to give himself time to get away. Now, would you not say, Dr. Narwood East, that all these acts committed on the spot and immediately after the time of the crime were acts consistent with an indication of a desire to conceal the act of murder?
Yes, I think so.
Thank you, Dr. Narwood East.
I have no more questions, my love. I call Dr. Henry William Jeans.
So for 2 more days, the argument carried on. Was True criminally insane? Sir Henry Curtis Bennett had demonstrated that the evidence pointing to True's insanity was conclusive. Yet by the English law, proof of insanity alone was not enough to escape conviction.
I must ask you to weigh every incident which took place on that Monday, and to ask yourselves what was there in any one of the incidents on that day in which he has shown any departure from normality, or which showed anything different to the conduct of a perfectly sane man. Now, lastly, remember, this was not a case of murder alone. It was a case in which murder was followed by theft, and by a thief who selected the more valuable things and left the worthless things. I do not want you to overlook the possibility of any verdict you may find. Act on what you believe to be your duty.
It shouldn't be long now.
Hope not. He's getting into a state.
Why the hell would I use a bloody rolling pin?
Members of the jury, have you agreed upon a verdict?
We have.
Do you find the prisoner, Ronald True, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty of willful murder.
You say that he is guilty, and that is the verdict of you all?
Yes.
Ronald True, you stand convicted of murder. Have you anything to say why judgment of death should not be given you according to law?
I am innocent, my lord.
That is all. Ronald True, the jury have found you guilty of willful murder. It is my duty to pass sentence according to law.
So I think I can say in all fairness that we have a damn good chance. We are basing the appeal around our belief that Justice McCarty misdirected the jury, bearing in mind the strength of the medical evidence. Sir Henry is very confident. Is there anything you want to ask, Ronald?
Yes, there bloody well is. When can I get out of this foul-smelling, ridiculous sack and into a decent suit?
But what do you think about the grounds for appeal?
I'm ambivalent.
Ambivalent?
Yes. I mean, however hasty the old judge seemed about sticking his black hat on, he came over as quite a decent old buffer. Be a bit rough if he gets a wigging for it.
Yes. Well.
Cherry pie, old bean.
Hard day, George.
I'll say.
Master Jacoby playing up again, is he?
Poor kid's quite all his chump since he's known he's going to be topped. You're lucky, you know, Charlie, having a gent like dear Ronnie, even if he is a bit doolally. Young Henry can't stop talking about him. I think he's some kind of hero. Oh, that reminds me. I've got a present for your Ronnie. What do you think of that? Jacoby asked me to pass it on to you to give to Ronnie. Said something about a club they both belong to. Artist club, I suppose.
Murderers' club.
Yes. What?
Hmm.
I reckon they're both for the chop. Henry and Ronnie. Well, it'll be only right for Ronnie to go if Henry does. Both as daft as each other. Oh, I reckon if Ronnie wins his appeal, there'll be a heck of a stink. Well, what do you think?
What's the name of that Duchess Henry killed?
Lady White. Why?
Look at this. I thought that was just a drawing of a nude on a bed, you know, rather badly done.
Mm-hmm.
Look at all that red on her chest and legs. That's not just bad colouring.
Blood?
That's right. Look at this. I couldn't make out what that was.
Looks like a little crown.
That's just what it is. A tiara. Your Henry, my son, has just drawn a picture of his dirty deed. That's Lady White.
Ugh.
Good old Henry. Dear old chum, many thanks for your kind letter. It's unfortunate that the appeal has failed, and I shall probably cash my chips in just prior to my birthday, June the 16th. And I'm considering petitioning the King to extend the period to June the 17th, should it be necessary. As the French used to say, never worry. Things are never so bad that they might not be worse. And if they are worse, that means you're dead, and you couldn't worry then. Remember, keep smiling, and no matter what happens, you'll have done some good in this little old world. A smile is sometimes worth $1 million. Cheerio, old nut. And if you come to the same place as I'm going to, I'll have a drink of nice, cold water ready for you on your arrival. Yours, as ever, Ronald True. Francie.
Sit down, True. You know the rules.
You look very tired.
You too, old girl.
Oh, I'm not sleeping very well.
Who is?
Your mother's been a brick, Ronnie.
Yes. How is Teddy?
Oh, he's beautiful.
Does he ask for me?
Yes.
Listen, Francie, you're going to have to accept certain facts. The likelihood is that the appeal will fail and I'll be a goner.
Oh, but Ronald, Mr. Palmer said that...
Ignore him! Look, I'm not going to be around all that long, so I want to give you some orders about Teddy. He must be brought up properly.
Ronald, please don't.
Yes, I think you should marry again. Yes, I think that'd be far the best thing. Marry some chap with plenty of loot about him, someone who doesn't mind being hitched to a murderer's wife, someone like a lawyer, or a banker, perhaps. A bit boring, maybe, but safe enough. Now, you must dress Teddy properly. Comb his hair at least 5 times a day and use water. Now, this is important! Use water, comb it straight back, and don't ever use anything French on his hair.
Oh, please stop talking.
I want to see... Francie? Speedy? Is that who I think it is?
What are you talking about? What's the matter, Ronnie? I can't hear anything.
You can't fool old Ronnie. He knows Jacoby's being topped. Poor little blighter. Speedy, promise me one thing.
What's that?
You mustn't let me go like that. Behaving like an infant when my time comes.
All right.
Thanks, old man. The rolling pin. To remind you of old Ronnie. So, the old Home Secretary has come through, has he? Bally good for him.
Yes, it means that your death sentence has been commuted.
You know, they should make a movie. Poor old Ronnie about to get hung when up comes the Home Sec on a dashing white charger waving a piece of paper. So where do I go from here?
Broadmoor.
Oh, hang on, old chap. That's a bloody loony bin.
Well, yes, but according to the medical board, you are.
A loony. By Jove. So, how long do I stay?
Forever.
And what's the bin like? Hardly a genteel haven for the retired and refined, I should think.
Ronald, I think you should count your blessings that the Home Secretary has taken this action.
You mean after what happened to Henry?
Precisely.
I suppose there was an awful stink.
There still is. Your reprieve was hardly well timed, 3 days after Jacoby's execution.
No, I take the point. I mean, if anyone was off his chump, it was poor Henry, and yet he's the one who gets topped. I suppose public opinion is a wee bit anti me.
I'm afraid so. Jacoby's become a sort of martyr. One newspaper is claiming that you are the illegitimate son of one of the royal family, and that His Majesty is directly responsible for the decision. The things they think of.
Oh, I don't know. I've always suspected I had royal blood in me. Some sort of affinity with the royal racehorses.
The outcry over True's reprieve was enormous. The press, outraged that True was to live after Jacobi had died, had a field day. Of course, the Home Secretary was called upon to explain his actions, and explain them he did. After a clear account to the House of the nature of English law with respect to insane criminals, there was little that could be said. Parliament was won over, and the press had to back down. The matter was forgotten. As for True, the most hated man in England for a short period in 1922, lived quietly and comfortably in Broadmoor, where his private income ensured he was never without the very best in food, clothes, and indeed service from the other inmates. He died there in 1951 at the age of 60.